Okay. If you're just tuning in, or if you're watching the replay, I would like to urge you to subscribe to my channel. We may be doing more content like this in the future. And if nothing else, definitely like this video. If you think you might not like this video, I would highly recommend liking this video now. You can always retroactively dislike the video after the fact. Otherwise, you might enjoy the video and forget that you didn't like the video, and I mean, I'm sure you would regret that. And you don't want to have, regret weighing down your conscience. Now, do you? Conscience, yeah. So yeah, like the video. Now, without further ado, I'm going to briefly talk about why I like this book so much. Why I am a huge fan of the Hyperion Cantos. To that end, I'm just trying to find a way to get OBS to work a certain way. Okay, well, I got my solution here. There we go. I just needed to be able to see the chat window. Cause, oh wow, that sucks. That sucks. This application doesn't let me resize it anymore. What a joke. What a piece of shit. Okay. Whatever, I guess we're just gonna have to drag it like that. Alright, so once again, in this video we're going to talk about my all-time favorite science fiction book. For a while there, when I stumbled into this book and read it, I used to go around telling people that I like it more than Star Trek, that a 4-book series was better than all of Star Trek. Now, in retrospect, now that the new car smell has worn off a little bit, I don't know if this is a fair assessment, but I still think it's a great sci-fi universe. And if you stay tuned till the end of this stream, I have some relevant news associated with this, and in fact I will probably have to do a separate video. It's relevant news, but it's the type of news that has had rumors going on and off for years, so it's one of those things where I'm not really counting on it, but it would be good news in relation to this story. So many years ago, I don't know, maybe like 2016 or so, I kept having the topic on my mind, like, how do inertial dampers work in Star Trek or even Star Wars? Inertial dampers being the, thingy in a starship where if a ship stops short, you don't get crushed to death, or if a ship is accelerating too quickly, you don't get crushed to death, or you don't get massive whiplash like you do in a car. If you stop short in a car, if you're driving 60 miles an hour and you crash into another object, you snap forward, you crash into the dashboard in Star, or if you're making a sharp turn. And that's why a race car track will usually have a slight, tilt to the turns, so that instead of the driver being torn out of their seat, there's a little bit of centrifugal force keeping them in the seat. So, in Star Trek, of course, if they may rapidly accelerate with their impulse drive, they may drop out of warp and hit the brakes real hard, even though warp itself doesn't necessarily mean they're going fast, it just means they're warping space. But there are situations, many situations, where a starfighter in Star Wars is maneuvering. Excuse me, a little tired here. and nobody gets hurt badly, you know. Now, in theory, if you have working inertial dampers, you could argue that you should feel no inertia at all, and yet they're always experiencing inertia in these sci-fi franchises. Personally, I'm happy with a compromise. I don't care about the proper physics at this point in time, and I'm willing to believe that, at least for storytelling purposes, that it is possible to have inertial dampers that work well enough to prevent you from snapping your neck, but not so good to completely cancel out inertia. Maybe you'll see if this pans out. For example, there's a term called Raspberry Jam Delta V, and this basically means when a ship is accelerating so rapidly that the human body turns into raspberry jam. And with that, I bring you to this Quora question, which literally inspired me to read this book. Basically, I wanted to know how inertial dampers work. So this man on Quora answers that too many G-forces on the body is deadly. We know this. With current technology, we can use springs, pads, counterweights, or airbags to try slow a body's movement in a rapidly changing vehicle speed or acceleration. And of course, realistically, you can't do a lot with springs. Maybe if you had like a 50-story high rocket and you put like massive springs into there and the flight seat was in the center of the rocket, maybe this would do something. But in practicality, not so much. Although actually there was like a damper of some kind that NASA did try to implement on a defunct rocket, and it was basically a shock absorber or a spring. Ultimately, they didn't really like the performance. They gave up on it. Now, typical sci-fi versions of inertial dampers jam around with the idea, pun intended, if you could instantly transport the ship or people inside to first locations and speeds, you could simply bypass the acceleration-deceleration physics. And blah 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 blah. Fast forward. The best version of an excellent solution to dealing with massive deadly G-forces to human bodies in spacecraft is in Dan Simmons' book series, The Hyperion Cantos. Set in the far future, the Catholic Church gets hold of some alien technology to allow people to not die and be rebuilt exactly as they were before they perished. No matter how badly their bodies were damaged, they can be resurrected. How it works in practice is this. On board the modern and comfortable spaceships, the crew and passengers settle into their crash couches / containers before the jump to light speed. The entertainment system is turned off, the captain gives clearance to go, the ship then accelerates to full speed, and the massive sudden acceleration instantly turns everybody into mush on the back of their containers. After reaching full speed, they are all brought back to life. That's what I call thinking outside the box. So, this description here is not entirely accurate, but it's close enough. It's pretty much consistent with what happens eventually in the novel or in the series. And interestingly, like, if you read this book, after reading this question, I was like, I gotta find this book. So I Google around and I see this picture and I'm just like, okay, I don't know what's going on here. I see something here. It's got spikes coming out of it. I thought this was a crew member on one of those ships that were mentioned. I was wrong, but this scene here does depict a landscape on the planet Hyperion. And I can tell you right now that these here are supposed to be Tesla trees, which basically carry an electrical charge. I believe these are the homes of the Bikura. You'll find out soon enough who they are. And we got like other versions of the book cover here, showing you some of the main characters, which consist of 7 pilgrims. I believe it's 7 pilgrims. I should know the answer to this. So we got like 3 of them right here, 4. So let's see, 5. We got the baby. We got Silenus. We got the priest. We got the soldier. We got Braun. We got the Templar Hetmastine, and there's supposed to be a prime number of pilgrims. Anyway, so you got like 6 or 7 pilgrims going on a pilgrimage to see the strike, to go on the so-called strike pilgrimage. And this occurs on the planet Hyperion. And these people, pretty much 7 characters, or 6 characters, each taking turns telling their own story as to why they're, pursuing this pilgrimage. Now, there's a creature in this book called the Strike. In the first picture, he only has 2 arms, but really the Strike has 4 arms and is something like 3 meters tall. The Strike is basically scarier than the Terminator, although there is one other creature in this book that is arguably scarier than the Terminator and the Strike, at least intermittently so. But yeah, made out of this weird whisker alloy. Looks like it's made of chrome or steel or metal, pointy as hell. These are the Japanese book covers for Hyperion right here. And you got their version of the Strike on the book cover right there. I always like the Japanese book cover. Whoops. I'm gonna have to open that manually. Oh yeah. That is a badass picture of the Strike. You can imagine this thing picking you up with 2 of its 4 arms and dragging you closer to its chest until it impales you with the, spike sticking out of the center. Very gruesome stuff right there. There's another version of the Strike giving you a better, height reference. And, pretty much the idea is use your imagination when you're reading this book, and you can depict everyone any way you want. It never occurred to me that Braun Lamia would be a black woman, but maybe she was. I don't recall her being described as such, but I'm entirely fine with this. Like, it's pretty consistent with her description. She's muscular, and she's a little taller than I think she should be, but then again, at least she's not fat like the poet. You got the wandering Jew. His name is Saul Weintraub. You got the consul, sort of like the Romans would have their diplomatic consul or proconsul. You got the soldier, Martin Silene, is his name, Fetman Kassad. And you get some cool artwork of this guy here. One of the coolest pictures I've seen of Fetman Kassad is him fighting the Strike right here, wearing some kind of a Force spacesuit. Force being the military body in the Hyperion universe. It's an acronym for something. Don't ask me what it is, but it's like a lazy acronym, I guess, but I'm fine with it. Real quick, let's take a look at the Japanese book cover because I think it's cool. And how do I open this? I guess we can open it with the Windows Photo Viewer. And we got like all kinds of stuff here. We got like big ass spaceships doing spaceship stuff. Over here, I personally like this book cover here where you got like drop ships. I mean, that looks like a drop ship, and I just hear sound effects in my ear. I hear like rocket engines making noises. You got a woman hooked up to like some umbilicals. You got John Keats, the poet, sitting here, or that might be his best friend John Severin. I'm not really sure. And you got like a fleet of ships up here doing their thing. You got the time tombs, which are a very critical piece of the Hyperion universe and important to the story itself. Here we are, got like a later book in the series known as Endymion, because it's a 4-book series. You got Hyperion, Fall of Hyperion, Endymion, and Rise of Endymion. And once again, like, you're gonna hear like the name of a city on the planet Hyperion called Endymion at some point in the book. So clearly the outback planet Hyperion is a centerpiece to this story. But with that, let's go and read the prologue, because that's what I wanted to do today, is draw some inspiration from another, YouTube personality named Brightest Day, spelled with a letter 1, number 1. But good guy, he basically reads some books on his channel as part of his content. And I wanted to share this story with anybody who likes good sci-fi. Let's begin. The Hegemony consul sat on the balcony of his ebony spaceship. Spaceship is pictured here. In this case, it's silver and black. I'm not going to make as many comments here, but I just want to point out that the ship here is a grayish color. It does have a matte black color, and it has some unique features. It has like nanotechnology or some magnetic stuff that allows it to morph shape a little bit, but essentially, I wanted to really quickly point out that the console, the Hegemony console, his spaceship, looks a lot like an old school rocket ship, basically. To just reference, if you get a picture of a crayon drawing of a rocket ship, same concept. So anyway, the Hegemony console sat on the balcony of his ebony spaceship and played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor on an ancient but well-maintained Steinway, with great green saurian things surged and bellow in the swamps below. A thunderstorm was brewing. I'm gonna have to edit this. The Hegemony console sat on the balcony of his Hegemony... This is why I recorded this before. The Hegemony console sat on the balcony of his ebony spaceship and played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor on an ancient but well-maintained Steinway, while great green saurian things surged and bellowed in the swamps below. A thunderstorm was brewing to the north. Bruised black clouds silhouetted a forest of giant gymnosperms, while stratocumulus towered 9 kilometers high in a violent sky. Lightning rippled along the horizon, closer to the ship. Occasional vague reptilian shapes would blunder into the interdiction field, cry out, and crash away through the indigo mists. The console concentrated on a difficult section of the prelude and ignored the approaching storm and nightfall. The fat line receiver chimed. The console stopped, fingers hovering above the keyboard, and listened. Thunder rumbled through the heavy air. From the direction of the gymnosperm forest, there came the mournful ululation of a carrion breed pack. Somewhere in the darkness below, a small-brained beast trumpeted its answering challenge and fell quiet. The interdiction field added its sonic undertones to the sudden silence. The fat line chimed again. Fat line is basically like subspace radio. "Damn," said the console, and went in to answer it. While the computer took a few seconds to convert and decode the burst of decaying tachyons, the console poured himself a glass of scotch. He settled into the cushions of the projection pit, just as the disky blinked green. "Play," he said. "You have been chosen to return to Hyperion," came a woman's husky voice. Full visuals had not yet formed. The air remained empty except for the pulse of transmission codes, which told the console that this fat line squirt had originated on the Hegemony administrative world of Tau Ceti Center. The console did not need the transmission coordinates to know this. The aged but still beautiful voice of Maynard Gladstone was unmistakable. "You have been chosen to return to Hyperion as a member of the Strike Pilgrimage," continued the voice. "To hell, you say," thought the consul, and rose to leave the pit. "You and 6 others have been selected by the Church of the Strike and confirmed by the All-Thing," said Maynard Gladstone. "It is in the interest of the hegemony that you accept." The consul stood motionless in the pit, his back to the flickering transmission codes. Without turning, he raised his glass and drained the last of the scotch. "The situation is very confused," said Maynard Gladstone, her voice weary. "The consulate and the Home Rule Consul flatlined us 3 standard weeks ago with the news that the time tombs showed signs of opening. The anti-entropic fields around them were expanding, and the strike has begun ranging as far south as the Bridle Range." The consul turned and dropped into the cushions. A hollow had formed of Maynard Gladstone's ancient face. Her eyes looked as tired as her voice sounded. "A force space task force was immediately dispatched from Parvati to evacuate the hegemony citizens on Hyperion before the time tombs open. Their time debt will be a little more than 3 Hyperion years." Maynard Gladstone paused. The consul thought he had never seen the Senate CEO look so grim. "We do not know if the evacuation fleet will arrive in time," she said, "but the situation is even more complicated. An ouster migration cluster of at least 4,000 units has been detected approaching the Hyperion system. Our evacuation task force should arrive only a short while before the ousters." The consul understood Gladstone's hesitation. An ouster migration cluster might consist of ships ranging in size from single-person ram scouts to can cities and comet forts holding tens of thousands of interstellar barbarians. The Force Joint Chiefs believe that this is the ouster's big push, said Maynard Gladstone. The ship's computer has positioned the hollow so that the woman's sad brown eyes seem to be staring directly at the consul. Whether they seek to control just Hyperion from the time tombs, or whether this is an all-out attack on the world web, remains to be seen. In the meantime, a force space battle fleet complete with a Farcaster construction battalion has spun up from the CAM system to join the evacuation task force. But this fleet may be recalled depending upon circumstances. The consul nodded absently and raised the scotch up to his lips. He frowned at the empty glass and dropped it into the thick carpeting of the hollow pit. Even with no military training, he understood the difficult tactical decision Gladstone and the Joint Chiefs were faced with. Unless a military Farcaster were hurriedly constructed in the Hyperion system at staggering expense, there would be no way to resist the ouster invasion. Whatever secrets the time tombs might hold would go to the hegemony's enemy. If the fleet did construct a Farcaster in time, the hegemony committed the total resources of force to defending the single distant colonial world of Hyperion. The world web ran the terrible risk of suffering an ouster attack elsewhere on the perimeter, or in a worst-case scenario, having the barbarians actually seize the Farcaster and penetrating the web itself. The console tried to imagine the reality of armored ouster troops stepping through the forecaster portals into undefended home cities on 100 worlds. The console walked through the hollow of Maynard Gladstone, retrieved his glass, and went to pour another scotch. "You have been chosen to join the pilgrimage to the strike," said the image of the old CEO, whom the press loved to compare to Lincoln or Churchill or Alvarez Temp or whatever of the pre-driver legend was in the historical vogue at the time. The Templars are sending their tree ship Yggdrasil," said Gladstone, "and the evacuation task force commander has instructions to let it pass. With a 3-week time debt, you can..." Oh, that's her voice. I gotta drink water, man. It's hard to do an old lady's voice. I'm sure it just sounds like me imitating an old lady's voice, but to get that tone, it dries out the chords a little bit, let me tell you. And I gotta say, either nobody... Oh, I got one viewer. Okay, good. Okay, I was worried it was broken. I was worried that nobody was watching my stream at all. So, I got one view, one like. Good enough for me. Okay, it's over. Let's end it. Nah, jokes aside, I was worried that nobody was tuning in at all, you know? But getting back on topic here, now that we know people are able to watch it. And I should add that the concept of time debt is very similar to time dilation. You know, in relativity, the closer to the speed of light that you travel, the slower time goes for the person in the ship. I mean, they don't perceive slower time. It's not like that Stargate SG-1 episode where they're running away from the black hole and everyone's in slow motion going. But essentially, it is possible to arrange circumstances in such a way that if you fly in a ship at a high velocity, like I'm talking like 99% of the speed of light, and you come back to Earth, you can come back, like you can maybe spend like a year on a ship, come back to Earth, and be 10 years younger than everyone else. Or in other words, everyone will have aged 10 years while you only aged 1 year. And of course, we don't have the technology to accelerate like that right now, but physics allows for it. And it is because of that concept and this book that I eventually went on to read the book Forever War by Joe Haldeman, another great book, although much shorter than this one here. This would be an example of a military... Well, that's fucked up. Okay, well that picture disappeared. That sucks. I freaking hate this WebP format so much. See, that's all I wanted to do. Okay, so that's interesting. The picture software I'm trying to use doesn't like it. Okay, so this would be like a forecaster portal, and there's different sized forecaster portals. This would be a military forecaster. It's large enough for a ship, and essentially a ship would go through it and appear on another planet instantaneously. Another example of a forecaster portal, if this software would cooperate with me, Yeah, I would say load the last image if you're not gonna crash on me, program. Wow, what a piece of shit. Wow, man. I gotta find me a better piece of software for image viewing. I had like a whole slideshow planned for this stream right here, and this is probably why I should just record this as a 1Z and then edit it and upload it, but I was hopeful this software would just cooperate with me and allow me to stream this stuff, you know? Oh good, there we go. I didn't lose any images. The software just decided to do stuff in a dumb way. That would be a forecaster portal, although it's not active so you can see right through it. What I want to do is find, here we are, this would be like an active forecaster portal. Here you're on a planet with blue skies, green shrubbery, and then on the other side of the forecaster portal is pretty much a different planet, and you would go through it. Now in the Hyperion universe, sometimes the forecaster could be on. It could look like a mirror if it was a one-way forecaster portal, or if it was configured to be that way. So they came in many forms. At some point in the story, you'll come across a river that spans multiple worlds. Heck, there are places where you have large forecaster portals similar to the large military forecaster portal, and they will pretty much act like a city block. So for instance, you'll have a big, what up punk waddle, you'll have a big city block, you'll have pretty much the ability to walk like one block in, you know, say fake New York on New Earth, because, you know, Earth don't exist in this universe. Then you'll be on Tau Ceti Center, which is actually only 14 light years away, but in the Hyperion universe, it is basically like Coruscant. I would say that Tau Ceti Square, TC Square, Tau Ceti Center is like Coruscant from Star Wars, except that they have these portals that allow people to instantaneously travel between locations. So pretty much what I'm doing, Punk Waddle, is doing a quick primer on my favorite sci-fi book known as Hyperion, from the Hyperion Cantos. And I think Cantos is like a poetry term or some bullshit like that, but it's written by a man named Dan Simmons. This I think is the United Kingdom version of the cover, and you know, it's a great book. Basically, it's a rough cut video. Might edit this and re-upload it, might redo the video and upload that, but I was just reading through part of the prologue. As a quick primer, the story starts off with a man on a spaceship, a man known as the Hegemony Consul. They never give him a name in the book. Consul would be like a diplomatic title, sort of like how the Roman Empire had the diplomatic proconsul or the consulate. And so this consul happens to have a spaceship which looks a bit like a rocket ship, you know, like an old school rocket ship, except that it implements much newer technology. And being this consul who used to work for the hegemony of man, which is basically the government who has dominion of all of the human worlds. In fact, the hegemony of man has dominion over a clump of worlds known as the World Web. And basically it's a web of worlds. It's got like 200 planets inducted into it. And all of these worlds have in common that they all have forecaster portals on them. And a forecaster is basically a means of instantaneous travel, where you walk through a portal and you're on a different planet like that. Now, of course, you gotta have like a universal card, which is basically a combination of a photographic ID and a credit card. And if you're poor, you don't really get to travel through forecaster portals very often, which is kind of interesting that, like, it's not really any sweat off anyone's back in this universe to allow people to travel between forecaster portals, but, people are still kind of like, if you're poor, it ain't happening very often. But if you're rich, you could put multiple forecaster portals in your house. You could have like a portal in every doorway, and so you could walk into your kitchen and be on a, maybe an ocean planet, on a barge, looking out the window, looking at a beautiful ocean. Or maybe you go to your basement and you got a weightlifting room in your basement, but it's on another planet and it happens to reside in a tower on a planet, wherever. Just like you go in your basement, you open the door, and next thing you know, you're standing in a tower. And that would basically be the gist of it. There was one guy, he had a toilet on a little raft in the middle of a ocean planet somewhere. He'd literally go open the bathroom door, step through the portal, and he could take a dump like right there on like a, on like a pier in the middle of an ocean somewhere, where anybody passing by would see his ass, but it was a big ocean planet. In fact, it was a planet called Mare Infinitus, because I guess it has an infinite ocean. So I do highly recommend this book. And so basically the consul is sitting there drinking scotch on his ship when he gets a holographic phone call, and the Senate CEO of the hegemony, the Senate CEO Maynard Gladstone, tells him that he's been selected to go on the strike pilgrimage. And he's like, what the hell? I don't give a shit about this. But in any case, he's been selected by the legislative body, by the city council, so to speak, by Twitter. In fact, they essentially had, like, this book was written in 1989. They have a sort of like a community voting body called the All thing. It's named after something from Iceland, but the gist of it is, in the book, it's sort of like Twitter, where people go on this internet thing using their smartphones. They call them comm logs in the Hyperion universe. Some people will have implants instead of smartphones, and they'll interact. They'll vote on referendums. They'll do all of that shit. So anyway, she explains to the consul, "We need your help," said Maynard Gladstone. "It is essential that the secrets of the time tombs and the strike be uncovered. This pilgrimage may be our last chance. If the ousters conquer Hyperion, their agent must be eliminated and the time tombs sealed at all cost. The fate of the hegemony may depend on it." The transmission ended except for the pulse of rendezvous coordinates. "Response?" asked the ship's computer. Despite the tremendous energies involved, the spacecraft was capable of placing a brief, coded squirt into the incessant babble of FTL bursts, which tied the human portions of the galaxy together. "No," said the consul, and went inside to lean on the balcony railing. Well, basically, the guy goes to bed. Okay, so that's the rest of it. It's a pretty good prologue. It's 15 minutes in the audiobook version. And basically, this guy just wants to drink beer, hunt for dinosaurs because he's on a dinosaur planet, and drive around in his hover car, which is made by a company that is basically like Cadillac. So, in the morning, he wakes up, ship hovers on a fusion flame, and he awakes with the peculiar headache. So he wakes up the next day after meeting up with the tree ship, because he does rendezvous with the tree ship. In fact, does it say here? No, it just says that he left the planet. So he wakes up. The consul woke with the peculiar headache and dry throat and sense of having forgotten 1,000 dreams which only periods in cryogenic fugue could bring. He blinked, sat upright on a low couch, and groggily pushed away the last sensor tapes clinging to his skin. There were 2 very short crew clones and 1 very tall, hooded Templar with him in the windowless ovoid of a room. One of the clones offered the consul the traditional post-thaw glass of orange juice. He accepted it and drank greedily. The tree is 2 light minutes and 5 hours of travel from Hyperion, said the Templar, and the consul realized that he was being addressed by Hetmastine, captain of the Templar tree ship and true voice of the tree. The consul vaguely realized that it was a great honor to be awakened by the captain, but he was too groggy and disoriented from fugue to appreciate it. The others have been awake for some time now, said Hetmastine, and gestured for the clones to leave. They have assembled on the foremost dining platform. Interestingly enough, this picture is sort of like at a bad angle, but you see a tree ship, and you got this force field here, or containment field, and you got the pilgrims sitting at the dinner table here. Of course, let's say this picture, or this picture, is more accurate and true to what the tree ship Yggdrasil would look like. Especially this one here. This definitely matches the description in the book. Said the consul, and took a drink. He cleared his throat and tried again. Thank you, Hetmastine, he managed, looking around at the egg-shaped room with its carpet of dark grass, translucent walls, and support ribs of continuous curved weirwood. The consul realized that he must be in one of the smaller environment pods. Closing his eyes, he tried to recall his memories of rendezvous just before the Templar ship went quantum. Guess that's like light speed. So, I should add that although people can do instantaneous travel between planets, on any planet that does not have Farcaster service or Farcaster portal set up, you still need to use regular ships with a hyperdrive, which in this universe is called a Hawking drive, which they also refer to as going quantum. The consul remembered his first glimpse of the kilometer-long tree ship as he closed for rendezvous. The tree ship's details blurred by the redundant machine and erg-generated containment fields, which surrounded it like a spherical mist. But its leafy bulk clearly ablaze with 1,000 lights, which shone softly through the leaves and thin-walled environment pods, or along countless platforms, bridges, command decks, stairways, and bowers. Around the base of the tree ship, engineering and cargo spheres clustered like oversized galls, while blue and violet drive streamers trailed behind like 10-kilometer-long roots. The others await, Hetmastine softly nodded and said softly and nodded toward low cushions where the consul's luggage lay ready to open upon his command. The Templar gazed thoughtfully at the weirwood rafters, while the consul, dressed in semi-formal evening wear of loose black trousers, polished ship boots, a white silk blouse which ballooned at the waist and elbows, topaz collar cinch, black demi-coat complete with slashes of hegemony crimson on the epaulets, and a soft gold tricorn. A section of the curved wall became a mirror, and the consul stared at the image there. A more than middle-aged man in his semi-formal evening wear, sunburned skin but oddly pale under the sad eyes. The consul nodded and turned away. Hetmastine gestured, and the consul followed the tall, robed figure through the dilation in the pod, onto the ascending walkway which curved up and out of sight, around the massive bark wall of the tree ship trunk. The consul paused, moved to the edge of the walkway and took a quick step back. It was at least 600 meters down, being created by the 1/6 standard gravity being generated by the singularities imprisoned at the base of the tree, and there were no railings. They resumed their ascent, turning off from the main trunk walkway 30 meters and half a trunk spiral later to cross a flimsy suspension bridge to a 5-meter wide branch. They followed this outward to where the riot of leaves caught the glare of the Hyperion sun. "Has my ship been brought out of storage?" asked the consul. "It is fueled and ready in Sphere 11, said Hetmastine. They passed into the shadow of the trunk, and stars became visible in the black patches between the dark lattice work of leaves. "The other pilgrims have agreed to ferry down in your ship if the Force authorities give permission," added the Templar. The consul rubbed his eyes and wished that he had been allowed more time to retrieve his wits from the cold grip of cryonic fugue. "You've been in touch with the You've been in touch with the task force? ? "Oh yes. We were challenged the moment we tunneled down from Quantum Leap. A hegemony warship is escorting us this very moment." Hetmastine gestured toward a patch of sky. The consul squinted upward, but at that second segments of the upper tiers of branches revolved out of the tree ship's shadow, and acres of leaves ignited in sunset hues. Even in the still shadowed places, glowbirds nestled like Japanese lanterns above lighted walkways, glowing swing vines and illuminated hanging bridges, while fireflies from old Earth and radiant gossamers from Maui Covenant blinked and coated their way through the labyrinths of leaves, mixing with constellations sufficiently to fool even the most star-wise traveler. Hetmastine stepped into a basket lift hanging from a whiskered carbon cable, which disappeared into the 300 meters of tree above them. The consul followed, and they were borne silently upward. He noted that the walkways, pods, and platforms were conspicuously empty except for a few Templars and their diminutive crew-clone counterparts. The consul could recall seeing no other passengers during his rushed hour between rendezvous and fugue, but he had put that down to the imminence of the tree ship going quantum, assuming then that the passengers were safe in their fugue couches. Now, however, the tree ship was traveling far below relativistic velocities, and its branches should be crowded with gawking passengers. He mentioned his observations to the Templar. "The 6 of you are our only passengers," said Hetmastine. The basket stopped in a maze of foliage, and the tree ship captain led the way up a wooden escalator worn with age. The consul blinked with surprise. A Templar tree ship normally carried between 2,000 and 5,000 passengers. It was easily the most desirable way to travel between the stars. Tree ships rarely accrued more than a 4 or 5 month time debt, making short, scenic crossings where the stars were a very few light years apart, thus allowing their affluent passengers to spend as little time as necessary in fugue. For the tree ship to make the trip to Hyperion and back, accumulating 6 years of web time with no paying passengers, would mean a staggering financial loss to the Templars. Then the consul realized belatedly that the tree ship could be ideal for the upcoming evacuation, with its expenses ultimately to be reimbursed by the hegemony. Still, the consul knew to bring a ship as beautiful and vulnerable as the Yggdrasil, one of only 5 of its kind, into a war zone was a terrible risk for the Templar Brotherhood. "Your fellow pilgrims," announced Hetmastine as he and the consul emerged onto the broad platform where a small group waited at the end of a long wooden table. Above them, the stars rotating occasionally as the tree ship changed its pitch or yaw, while to either side of the solid sphere of foliage curved away like the green skin of some great fruit. The consul immediately recognized the setting as the captain's dining platform, even before the 5 other passengers rose to let Hetmastine take his place at the end of the table. The consul found an empty chair waiting for him to the left of the captain. When everyone was seated and quiet, Hetmastine made formal introductions. Although the consul knew none of the others from personal experience, several of the names were familiar, and he used his diplomat's long training to file away identities and impressions. To the consul's left sat Father Lenore Hoyt, a priest of the old-style Christian sect known as Catholic. For a second, the consul had forgotten the significance of the black clothing and Roman collar, but then he remembered St. Francis Hospital on Hyperion, where he had received alcohol trauma therapy after his disastrous first diplomatic assignment there almost 4 standard decades ago. And at the mention of Hoyt's name, he remembered another priest, one who had disappeared on Hyperion halfway through his own tenure there. Lenore Hoyt was a young man by the consul's reckoning, no more than his early 30s, but it appeared that something had aged the man terribly in the not-too-distant past. The consul looked at the thin face, cheekbones pressing against sallow flesh, eyes large but hooded in deep hollows, thin lips set in a permanent twitch of muscle, too downturned to be called even a cynical smile. The hairline not so much receding as ravaged by radiation, and he felt that he was looking at a man who had been ill for years. Still, the consul was surprised that behind the mask of the concealed pain there remained the physical echo of the boy in the man, the faintest remnants of the round face, fair skin, and soft mouth which had belonged to a younger, healthier, less cynical Lenore Hoyt. Next to the priest sat a man whose image had been familiar to most citizens of the hegemony. Some years earlier, the consul wondered if the collective attention span in the world web was as short now as it had been when he had lived there. Shorter, probably. If so, then Colonel Fedmon Cassad, the so-called butcher of South Brescia, was probably no longer either infamous or famous. To the consul's generation, and all of those who lived in the slow expatriate fringe of things, Cassad was not someone one was likely to forget. We're going to get a picture of Colonel Cassad right now. There we go, that'll do. Colonel Fedmon Cassad was tall, almost tall enough to look the 2-meter Hetmastine in the eye, and dressed in force black, with no rank insignia or citations showing. The black uniform was oddly similar to Father Hoyt's garb, but there was no real resemblance between the two men. In lieu of Hoyt's wasted appearance, Cassad was brown, obviously fit and whip-handle lean, with strands of muscle showing in shoulder, wrist, and throat. The colonel's eyes were small, dark, and all-encompassing as the lenses of some primitive video camera. His face was all angles, shadows, planes, and facets, not gaunt like Father Hoyt's, merely carved from cold stone. A thin line of beard along his jawline served to accent the sharpness of his countenance, as surely as blood on a knife blade. The colonel's intense, slow movements reminded the consul of an earth-bred jaguar he had seen in a private seed ship zoo on Lussus many years before. Cassad's voice was soft, but the consul did not fail to notice that even the colonel's silences commanded attention. Most of the long table was empty. The group clustered at one end. Across from Fedmon Cassad sat a man introduced as the poet Silenus. Silenus appeared to be quite the opposite of the military man across from him. Where Cassad was lean and tall, Martin Silenus was short and visibly out of shape. Countering Cassad's stone-cut features, the poet's face was as mobile and expressive as a earth primate's. His voice was a loud, profane rasp. There was something, thought the consul, almost pleasantly demonic about Martin Silenus, with his ruddy cheeks, broad mouth, pitched eyebrows, sharp ears, and constantly moving hands, sporting fingers long enough to serve a concert pianist or a strangler. The poet's silver hair had been cropped into rough-hewn bangs. Martin Silenus seemed to be in his late 50s, but the consul noticed the telltale blue tinge to throat and palms, and suspected that the man had been through more than a few Poulsen treatments, obviously an anti-aging treatment. Silenus' true age might be anywhere from 90 to 150 standard years. If he were close to the latter, the consul knew the odds were that the poet was quite mad. As boisterous and animated as Martin Silenus seemed upon first encounter, so the next guest at the table exuded an immediate and equally impressive sense of intelligent reticence. Saul Weintraub looked up upon introduction, and the consul noted the short gray beard, lined forehead, and sad luminous eyes of the well-known scholar. The consul had heard tales of the wandering Jew and his hopeless quest, but he was shocked to realize that the old man now held the infant in his arms, his daughter Rachel. No more than a few weeks old, the consul looked away. Something sketchy going on there, huh? The sixth pilgrim and only woman at the table was Braun Lamia. When introduced, the detective stared at the consul with such intensity that he could feel the pressure of her gaze even after she looked away. A former citizen of the 1.3G world of Lussus, Braun Lamia was no taller than the poet, 2 chairs to her right, but even her loose corduroy ship suit did not conceal the heavy layers of muscle on her compact form. Black curls reached to her shoulders. Her eyebrows were 2 dark lines dabbed horizontally across a wide brow. And her nose was solid and sharp, intensifying the aquiline quality of her stare. Later, Lamia's mouth was wide and expressive to the point of being sensuous, curled slightly at the corners in a slight smile which might be cruel or merely playful. The woman's dark eyes seemed to dare the observer to discover which was the case. It occurred to the consul that Braun Lamia might well be considered beautiful. Introductions completed, the consul cleared his throat and turned towards the Templar. Het Mastine, you said that there were 7 pilgrims. Is M. Weintraub the seventh? Hetmastine's hood moved slowly to side. No, only those who make a conscious decision to seek the strike may be counted among the pilgrims. The group at the table stirred slightly. Each must know that what the consul knew. Only a group comprising of a prime number of pilgrims might take the strike church sponsored trip north. I am the seventh, said Hetmastine, captain of the Templar tree ship Yggdrasil and true voice of the tree. In the silence which followed the announcement, Hetmastine gestured and a group of crew clones began serving the pilgrims their last meal before planetfall. It's funny, these people just woke up. In the book, at least. So, the ousters are... Oh, wait, it's a woman's voice. So... I don't know how to do a woman's voice. So... she's like got a husky voice. So... the ousters are not in system yet? Asked Brahm Lamia. Her voice had a husky, throaty quality, which strangely stirred the consul. And I bet my voice stirred anybody listening right now, while doing her voice. No, said Hetmastine, but we cannot be more than a few standard days ahead of them. Hoping to get to the good part here. Our instruments have detected fusion skirmishes within the system's Oort cloud. Will there be war? Asked Father Lenore Hoyt. His voice seemed fatigued as his expression... Wait, I'm gonna try to be a fatigued priest here. Will there be war? I was trying to be... Okay, anyway. I figured he sounded something like that. When no one volunteered a response, the priest turned to his right, as if retroactively directing the question to the consul. The consul sighed. The crew clones had served wine. He wished it had been whiskey. Who knows what the ousters will do? Hetmastine said. They no longer appear to be motivated by human logic. Martin Silenus laughed loudly, spilling his wine as he gestured. Trying to spill my wine. There we... Oh, shit. Anyway, okay. As if we fucking humans were ever motivated by human logic. He took a deep drink, wiped his mouth, and laughed again. Ha 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 ha! Braun Lamia frowned. If the serious fighting starts too soon... Man, I cannot do her voice. She said, perhaps the authorities will not allow us to land. Now, side note, in the audiobook, a lot of people complain about the voice of Braun Lamia. They say that she sounds like a robot. I don't think she's a bad voice actor. Maybe she doesn't really do a good job of doing that husky quality, but I wouldn't call her a bad voice actor. It's not everyone's taste. I thought, she was okay, but, I get it. And once again, the strike members, you got the priest over here who looks like hell. Which is funny, in the book they describe him as wearing the black with the Roman collar, but I really tend to think of this priest as someone dressed as like as a contemporary priest. Like when you see a priest on a subway train, you see a priest between mass. When they're not wearing their cassock. They're just wearing a black jumpsuit, black pants, black shirt with a white collar in the middle. So that's what I tend to imagine. The robe, I usually imagine, being old world, maybe old school priest, or like if you ever see like a Latin American priest. I used to joke, I used to see like when I worked at Best Buy, sometimes the priest would show up from like the Peruvian cargo ship. And this guy would have a fucking huge wooden cross on and a long... really nice robe on, and I'd be like, man, that guy got the big cross, looks like a fucking Spanish Inquisitor right there. I used to call the guy the Inquisitor priest. But I digress. And I oh shit, I gotta put like links in the... I actually have a notepad file with links to all of these pictures, because I'm not a scumbag when I take pictures from other people. I'm not saying anyone else is a scumbag, but when I take pictures from other people's work, I at least have the decency. I tried to at least have the decency. I can't say I always do it, but to link it. So I will be adding that to the description. How many pages should have? I was hoping to get to like a part that I could just end it on, but man, it just goes on. I mean, which is good. It's a good book. I enjoy it. Like I'm gonna listen to the audiobook after this shit. But man, I just want to share my love for this book with everyone, you know. And so I think I'm gonna just drop it right here. I mean, you get the idea. The consul was on a ship. He rendezvous with the tree ship Yggdrasil, which is named after the ship from a Viking or Norse mythology. Well, it's not a ship in Norse mythology. I guess it's a tree of some kind. Never heard of it until I read this book. And, you know, it's like a genetically tailored ship. The, what do you call it? Templars are like ecologists. They worship a guy named John Muir, M-U-I-R. And basically, he's like a naturalist, a guy who used to like kind of hang out in California. He would document stuff that he discovered, or I guess he would just take stats on trees. Okay, just want to make sure. Anyway, so John Muir, somewhat famous, wrote some books. Probably studied nature, I assume. There is no religions about him, but in this book, these Templars basically worship John Muir. They don't really worship him, but they venerate him. Here's another picture of our pilgrims. I don't know why Fetman Kassad is holding a gun up like he's celebrating something, but maybe they're just happy they made it to the Sphinx. It's not really a Sphinx, it looks like one. If I had to guess, I would say that that's Colonel Fetman Kassad. Maybe that's the fat poet. That might be the woman, Braun Lamia. Yeah, I'm not gonna guess characters. Well, anyway, in conclusion, after reading that Quora question that answered what makes, you know, how do inertial dampers work, I was pretty much sold. I was like, I gotta read this book. It's an awesome sci-fi book, and it's like considered soft sci-fi because it doesn't get super deep into the scientific aspects, the physics of everything. But it's just a good all-around book. Now this is actually a picture I should import into OBS so that I could resize it and crop it. See, I was trying to use a new picture viewer to do what I'm doing today. Basically, it's like an app. You run it on your second monitor, and it makes pictures come up on your other monitor for streaming purposes, or at least that's what I'm using it for. It's a little better than what I would be using otherwise, and I think it's still easier for a lot of pictures, but for this picture, yeah, I'm definitely going to cover this again. I'll try to do a more refined video or stream. I'm not really sure how I'm going to go about this yet, but I just want, you know, to get people to, you know, see. I want to try to share or encapsulate why I love this book and why, you know, hopefully it might be worth other people watching it. Oh, got a little snotty there. Anyway, so with that, I guess it's been an hour 16. So many directions I can go with this. But I think I'm just going to let the idea stew on my brain, and we'll revisit this, and maybe I'll make an edit of this video. In fact, I've been recording this whole time, so it's good. I don't even have to download it from YouTube. I just go on my own computer, edit this video, and voila. I can, you know, clean it up and recreate a video. So we're in pretty good shape here. But it's funny, I was on a stream with Pacific 414 earlier today, and Same concept. There was this picture of the Millennium Falcon that looked really cool. It was like a Star Wars poster made in Japan, like a movie poster, and it looked good. Better than many of the posters we got here. And same thing here, like these book covers are magnificent. And at one point I did process this through some AI software to like machine learning software to enlarge and enhance these images. Especially this book cover on the top right corner. Just so much cool shit happening on that cover. You got like a nuclear explosion, you got a ship landing, you got the Shrike with its 4 arms. But yeah, I'm running out of steam right now, yo. Like brain, sleep wise, I'm yawning. I should probably regroup and revisit this topic at my convenience. Maybe go to my bookmarks and excerpts and work it out from there. Alright, so once again, anybody who's watching, I would urge you to like and subscribe. And stay tuned if you want to, see a more consolidated video about Hyperion. Leave a comment. If you don't want to see a consolidated video about Hyperion, doesn't matter. I'm going to make one anyway. As soon as I remember how I wanted to do it. The main reason I did a stream today was because I just wanted to kind of hit the ground running here. This is something I've been wanting to do, and sometimes when I record something, I just keep re-recording it like 5 times. So this time I wanted to like just stream it, because I find that like I'm more likely to get content out if I just straight away stream it. And it's like one thing, easy to play a video game and talk to people or talk about stuff, or just share the enjoyment of the game at the same time. Something like this, of course, requires a little bit of preparation, but we're looking good. Also, upcoming content. I got a Ultra HDMI hopefully coming in the mail soon. An Ultra HDMI is a device that lets you add HDMI ports to a Nintendo 64. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that whenever that happens. But in the meantime, I gotta find the key to my computer. Literally, I need to find a key to my computer so that I can do the video on the Xbox upgrade. Not really the key. I have a key to remove hard drives from the front bay on my computer, because I did some work on my computer, and that's another video coming up. You'll see. I have a video about my computer, like what the specs are, what's inside of it. It will give people an opportunity to make fun of my wire management. But anyway, with that, yeah, if you have any questions or any specific aspects of the book you want me to cover, let me know. I will be covering another book soon, or I may be covering another book concurrently, because the Hyperion Cantos is long and expansive. I think there's like 10 different ways you could talk about Hyperion, and 10 different angles that you can cover it from. But in the case of something like Joe Haldeman's Forever War, that's like an 8-hour audiobook. An 8-hour audiobook, as opposed to like however many hours long this book would take to listen to. To listen to all 4 books of the Hyperion Cantos, forget it, would take like days. Literally days. So for reference, real quick, how long would it take to listen to Hyperion? So the last 2 books in the series are 20 hours. Man, I gotta reload this Audible app. It's like 20 to 30 hours a book, so like there's at least 80 hours of audiobook content here. At least, probably closer to 90 or 100 hours, but like about 90 hours of audiobook content. So it's something like that. And this painting doesn't depict the strike accurately because it's got 4 arms, but they maybe are folded in somehow in a unique way. I also noticed there's like this bug over here. And they have these like weird ant-like bugs on Hyperion. I think they call them ants, but they're like a different type of ant. And the vegetation is actually pretty accurate to what is described in the book. So with that, yeah, stay tuned and thanks for tuning in, and I will end this now.